So, I'm a pretty huge Star Wars fan. I've been a Star Wars fan since I was born, pretty much. And I just want to talk about the state of Star Wars and where it is, especially because of the Acolyte. Not just the Acolyte, there's other things too. I think the bigger problem, if I had to sum it up with Star Wars at the moment, is that they just pump shit out. That's what they do. They just pump shit out. Remember when Star Wars was like a movie every 3 years? Now it's like a series every couple months. And it's how do you make something that's actually good and stands out in that time frame? You know what I mean? Like, let's just, before we get down to the Acolyte and stuff, everyone's talked to death about that. Let's take a look at Ahsoka. Ahsoka was one of the better shows, I guess. But even then, Ahsoka is just mid. It's mid. You know why it's mid? Probably because they didn't spend that long making it. You know what I mean? Same thing to me with The Mandalorian Season 2 and Season 3. Season 2 had a lot of cool cameos, sure, but it still felt rushed in terms of its writing and everything like that and whatever. It just feels like Star Wars used to be this thing that was made with lots of passion, lots of love, lots of care. I'm not saying it was perfect. There were obviously cringy moments in the prequels and such, even though I love the prequels. They're not perfect movies, But nowadays, it just feels like it's to make money. And it's to make money as quickly as possible, basically, which they are failing at anyways. The Acolyte just... what my biggest problem with the Acolyte is? Obviously, the writing is terrible. The acting is not so great either. It just seems... It's just unremarkable in a lot of ways, but where it is remarkable is in terrible ways. Like, obviously the whole thread thing, that I don't mind so much. A different sect having a different idea of the Force, that's fine. But they contradict themselves within their own idea of the Force, saying it's not a weapon, then using it as a weapon, like 2 minutes later. You know what I mean? My big problem is, at least with the Acolyte so far, is, especially in that third episode, despite all the bad writing and whatever, is them making the Jedi seem like fucking evil child predators. It's been known for a long time that the Jedi obviously took in children to train them young so they wouldn't have attachments and stuff. But, in the old lore and stuff like that, it was never like, oh, we're going to take your children. We're going to, even though you say you don't want to give your children to us, because this is what happens in the Acolyte. They're like, we don't want to give you our children. And the Jedi still go and pursue the children. It's like, no, that's not what the Jedi did, okay? If the Jedi went to a planet or to a family and the family were like, we don't want to give you our kid, they would submit. They'd be like, okay. And you know how I know this? Because of one specific Clone Wars episode, which Leslie Hyland probably didn't bother to watch, where there is an episode where Cad Bane is going to go and abduct a Force-sensitive child against the mother's will. And Obi-Wan goes and saves that child. And then he doesn't take the child to the Jedi Temple to be trained or whatever. He just gives the child back to the mother. And this is one of my big problems now, is that I've seen that what's been happening with Disney a lot. The Jedi were never perfect. Of course they were never perfect. I think it was a big point to the prequels to show that the Jedi had lost their way a little bit. That they had become generals, that they had become a little bit too hubris. But they were still trying to be good. They were still trying to be good people at their heart. But then, with, if you take a look at Legends, which to me is still more canon than the current canon, in terms of what happened after Episode 6 at least. If you take a look at what Luke did with the Jedi Order in Legends, he got rid of all the flaws of the Jedi Order and of the old Jedi Order and made a new, better Jedi Order. Now, that's not how it goes in canon, but... I'm talking about what I think is written better and what I think is more true to the spirit of Star Wars, because the Jedi were always meant to be the heroes, and one of my big problems now is that they're introducing this thing where it's like, no, the Jedi aren't the heroes anymore. You know what I mean? Like, even in Episode 8, where Luke is like, oh, the legacy of the Jedi is failure. You know what I mean? So we have that. We have the Acolyte turning them into child predators, basically, and groomers, which I hate. And then, it's not like nothing good has come from Disney Star Wars. We've had the Jedi Survivor games, which I really like, with Cal Kestis. But, part of me has wondered, why is that good? Maybe it's good because it's not a series or a movie, so they, number one, pay less attention to it. Number two, because it's a video game, so it has to be developed for longer for it to come out functional, which means you have more time to work on the story and flesh things out and actually make a competent and good story. And that's also probably why some of the books have been good as well, because it's like, it's just a book, you know. And that's the funny thing, is when you take a look at the Ahsoka book, it's pretty good. And then you look at what they retcon in the show, and it's like the book did it better. You know what I mean? Like, why are you retconning it when you're making it worse? And that I just don't understand. And I am a lifelong Star Wars fan, and I have a replica of Cal Kestis's saber, you know, on one of my shelves. So it's not that I hate everything that's come out of Disney Star Wars, but I do think they're in general going in the wrong direction. And to me, that just sucks so fucking bad. It really does, because, yeah, I mean, even from The Force Awakens, you know, I loved The Force Awakens when it came out, but looking at it retrospectively, not the greatest choice, actually, because it's just nostalgia bait. It wasn't actually anything new or interesting or innovative or anything. You know, George Lucas actually said about that movie, they didn't do enough new. I might be paraphrasing, but that was basically a sentiment. They didn't do enough new stuff. So it's just frustrating, man. And then we get to the Acolyte, and you just see how much they don't care. You know what I mean? Or I think this is the big problem with Star Wars, is there's less consistency now. Under George Lucas, there was a lot more consistency within Star Wars. Yes, maybe you'd get a bad movie sometimes, but it wouldn't break the lore. And it wouldn't... You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, the love story between Anakin and Padme is cringe at times, but it doesn't break the lore of Star Wars. The actual idea is pretty good. It's just the execution sucked. You know, as opposed to now, we have actual bad ideas. But not just bad ideas with bad execution. That's basically what the Acolyte is. Bad idea, bad execution. And it's because they're giving the show to people that don't actually care about Star Wars. They care about sending their own message. I'm not even talking about a political message, even though that is probably part of it. But whatever it is, whatever message you're trying to send, if you're trying to send a message as opposed to trying to tell a story, that's where you've already gone wrong. You know what I mean? It's just sad to see that Disney, or Lucasfilm as it is now, let's say, is favoring people who want to push an agenda over people who want to, you know, tell a good story. And that's not, I'm not right-wing, I'm not super left-wing either. I guess I'm more left-leaning than I'm right-leaning, but, you know, a lot of people will get called homophobic, sexist, racist, whatever, for saying that about Star Wars. But look, one of my favorite TV shows that's come out recently is The Boys. Okay? And The Boys has a lesbian character in it that is one of my favorite characters. The Boys has a gay character in it that I really like. The Boys has strong female characters in it that I really like Kimiko and Queen Maeve and stuff, and Starlight and whatever. So it's got nothing to do with being homophobic, sexist, or racist. It really has nothing to do with that. Like, but that's just what they like to, you know, use as an excuse so they can keep doing what they're doing. You know, that's the thing. When episode 2 came out and people ragged on it, George Lucas didn't sit there going, oh, you're this or that. You know, like, he just took it. You know what I mean? And that's one of my problems. Is like, they can't admit to making a bad show. You know, I get that you're never going to say, oh, our show is awful, because obviously that's terrible marketing. But it's one thing to, like, just like the show comes out, it's bad, and being quiet, as opposed to the show comes out, it's bad, and then saying anybody who says this show is bad is a racist or a homophobe or a sexist. And to me, that's just ridiculous. Because to me, the Acolyte almost seems more racist in of itself. You know why? Because they seem to be developing this plot where basically the only white Jedi that you see in the show seems to be the one who's done all the fucked up shit, you know, like the young, like, he gets controlled by the witches in episode 3 and, like, whatever. And then the episode prior, he kills himself with poison because of, like, this bad stuff that the Jedi apparently did that is going to get revealed later. And to me, that's more racist than anything else. Having, like, pretty much the only fucking white character in the show just basically seeming to be a dick. And, you know, if that happened once, it's fine. But it seems to be a trend with Disney that they seem to be hating on white men for some reason. And I wish that wasn't the case, because me saying that makes me sound like a fucking incel, but they are, like, legitimately doing that. At least Leslie Hyland is with this series. I'm not saying that's the case with everything, because obviously there was Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order, where Cal Kestis, a white man, is the protagonist, and he's a really good protagonist. You know, I have no problem with making more shows and movies and games where there's, like, a black female protagonist, or, like, a black male protagonist, or a gay protagonist, or whatever the fuck, okay? But that, don't make their identity sorry, I got a little mixed up there. Don't make their race, don't make their sexuality their identity, because that is so corny. It's like, most gay people, right, their gayness isn't their identity, it's just their sexual preference. You know, most black people, their blackness isn't their identity, it's just what they were born as, you know. And to me, this goes a bit into politics, I guess. To me, whenever you find a gay person or a black person where their blackness is their identity or their gayness is their identity, it's corny as fuck. It's corny as fuck. I mean, just imagine how corny it would be if a straight person's whole identity was that they're straight and they love fucking women. I mean, like, there are some people like that out there, and it's corny as fuck too. So this whole, like, focusing on gender and whatever, it's just, like, stupid. It's like, I don't care what you are. And I don't care, like, again, guys can kiss in a show and it's totally fine. Frenchie does it in The Boys, and I have no problem with it. You know, but it's because Frenchie is just, like, bisexual in the show, you know? But they don't make that his whole fucking character, you know what I mean? Whereas in Star Wars these days, sometimes it feels like they make the person's gender or the person's sexuality or whatever their identity. And to me, that is corny as fuck. But yeah, main point, what's wrong with Star Wars these days, in my opinion, is there isn't enough quality control. There isn't someone heading the ship who actually knows what they're doing. You know, like, Dave Filoni is good and stuff, but he's not heading the ship. You know what I mean? And in my opinion, it shouldn't even be Dave Filoni making the shows. There's a lot of people who want Dave Filoni to be making the shows and to be whatever. What I think Dave Filoni should be is the guy at the top who signs off everything, like George Lucas sort of did for the Clone Wars, you know? Be the guy at the top who's signing off on things. But, like, Dave Filoni should more be, like, employing another director and another writer, different to himself, but he's the guy who greenlights everything, basically, who approves it. But that's not what we have. Dave Filoni isn't at the top of the chain. Kathleen Kennedy is. And Kathleen Kennedy seems to be more interested in politics, identity politics, that sort of thing, than actually a good story. Now, sometimes you get a good story from Star Wars that has identity politics in it simply because the person's a good writer or whatever. But more often than not, what we're seeing, in my opinion, is identity politics and all that kind of thing being first, and writing and stuff being second, which to me is terrible and awful. And my number one problem, actually, with current Star Wars is how they are seeming to vilify the Jedi, making the Jedi the bad guys. And I hate it. And that's my opinion. And yeah, I just had to get that out there, you know. I know pretty much no one's going to watch this video, but that's my opinion about the current state of Star Wars. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed.